right, sorry about the delay. um, I have no excuse. Oh, thank you for tuning in, Warren Steele. Sadly, I'm a week behind on this story, so I'll have to leave after the intro commentary and catch up. No problem. No problem. I don't think there's any immediate spoilers off the top of my head. This middle book of the three, as I've commented before, is a lot more. It does still have a bunch of dramatic stuff happening, but it's a lot more about introspection, as opposed to, oh, crazy battle scenes that move the plot forward. It's more, oh, these characters are interacting with each other and revealing new ideas about each other, sort of thing, which is rather well handled, mostly, if occasionally rather abrupt, which is kind of a Tomino hallmark. Alrighty. So, previously on, I honestly don't remember. It's been a long week. Previously on, what did we have? I believe last week there was an altercation between the Federation's 300th Autonomous and sort of a test run that Zeon's. No, the Federation is the 127th Autonomous, and Zeon is the 300th Autonomous. I get them confused because they're both autonomous battle groups. Anyway, I believe there was an altercation between them last week. Or was it the week before? Anyway, the Elmeth that Cusco Al was piloting got hit, but otherwise it was a bunch of Rickdoms farting about inflicting significant damage. Oh, that's right. The Xeon 300th Autonomous attacked the moon base. I think it was Last Hope or First something. It was FS or L something. I can't keep them. I can't keep them straight. It's all in the previous ones. I'm sure that won't be a problem for anyone. Um, so, actually, I think last time not a lot happened. I'm double checking. No, no, they did. They did confront each other at the moon. Um, Basically, Xeon's new type core, which is at this point composed of some number of mobile suits. It's like 5 or 6 mobile suits, and then the Elmeth. Most of them, I think, are all Rick Doms, and then the Elmeth, which is basically there to do support, more or less. Um, it was basically a test run to see if they could handle themselves as a combat unit, and suffice it to say, other than the fact that they got, they did get pushed away, they pretty much had their way with the Federation moon base. Um, so the new type combat unit, Caecilia's new type combat core, is definitely very much a real thing at this point. Um, the Xeon new type combat core is composed of Char, Challia Bull, Char Aznable, Challia Bull, Cusco Al, somebody called Cramble, and there's like 1 or 2 other people there who may or may not get a name later. I can't actually remember. Um, keep an eye on them, and cool stuff will happen. Cool stuff happens there. Um, but mostly, for me, I think the highlight of the episode is, or that last installment, is just kind of the deepening bond between Amuro and Sayla, in terms of, okay, let's have earnest discussions with each other about what we think and what we think this whole new type thing is all about. And they're not in complete accord, because they're different people, and it's hard for people to be in complete accord, even if you have some degree of empathic interaction that you've got going on. Um, oh yeah, and we have what is he, sergeant, or is he a full-blown lieutenant? McVary for the Federation. And he's basically in charge. McVary is in charge of a fleet of basically space fighters, which at this point are more or less hideously outclassed by literally everything. But the Federation will take absolutely everything it can get. It will use anything, any resource that it has to prosecute the war that they're in, because they've kind of been on the back foot up until very recently, and now they're starting to fight back. That's where the mobile suits, the Gundam, the gun cannon, and the GMs come into play, as well as the Mr. Balls, which are little. If you've ever seen 2001: A Space Odyssey, and you remember the EVA pod that they use in that, it's basically that with a smaller window and a little recoilless cannon on top. Two little rinky-dink arms. They're very cute. They're very cute. They are death traps. Um, we see a number of them in the anime series get literally kicked around. It's not good. It's a death sentence to be in one, but it's better than being naked in space, basically, and not much else. With enough of them, you can actually put in a lot of work. It actually winds up being something that uh, I don't know if you'd call them super vital to the war effort in the anime continuity, but they are for the Federation. They're a stopgap. They're better than nothing, and without them, probably you wouldn't have as many people in a space combat arena that could actually do much. So, but gyms are more impactful to the war effort in general, particularly in the anime, because they wind up copying over the learning computer data. I think at Jaburo, um, if memory serves, from Amuro's Gundam, which basically serves as this great starting point for basically setting up movement macros for all the gyms, as well as, general combat data on all the Zeon mobile suits that he's fought up until that point, as well as a bunch of other things. So the Federation gets this big leg up. And the gym itself is better stats wise than like the Zaku 1, generally better stats wise than most Zaku 2 variants, and only gets outclassed by stuff like the Dom and the GAN, because the GAN's like a turbo specialist unit, but it's impractical as hell. Because it's like, oh, let's have a shield filled with things that explode. That makes sense. Um, and then a big beam stick, and that's about it. As well as high movement specs, as I recall. And then, of course, in the anime continuity, the Zeon fields the Gelgoog, but they are basically all out of worthwhile pilots at this point. So the Gelgoog is wasted on most of the people in them, regrettably. But otherwise, is depending on the source book that you read or stat book that you read, actually has better specs than the Gundam does, the RX-78 too. That's not always true. Sometimes it's like, oh well, that's its initial rollout, but then it gets the magnetic coating and it's better. We're ignoring all that because the stats don't matter. Basically, the stats don't matter. Um, Mostly because they conflict. There's lots of conflicting stat sheets. I should find that image that's got like a bunch of the 1 Year War or Universal Century mobile suit. Um, it's like a bar graph that shows a bunch of different specs. And well, it turns out that oh geez, the Victory 2 has like obscenely high, like infinite acceleration, and the this is back when people remembered that G Savior existed. The G Savior has like really obnoxious
flight speed, but it can't sustain it. I should see if I can find that. That thing is goofy. It's like, no, none of these make sense. None of these make sense. Good times. Anyway, with that, that's enough yammering, and we'll get reading. Um, this is not going to be a super long segment because we just have the last, I don't know, 40 pages or so of book two to get through, and then it'll be on to the third book, Confrontation, um, which is where a lot of interesting divergences occur. It's like book one and two are like, yeah, okay, things are a bit different here. Book one is like, oh, okay, yeah, I could see how this could happen if you just pretend Earth doesn't happen and you skip by a couple things and wow, we're already at Lala. And then book two is like, okay, things are rather different, but all right, I can sort of see it being in the same realm. Book three is where it's like, hey, you know all these characters we've got? We had them in the original series and did a little fleshing out there. We're going to flesh the hell out of them. Book three is like we get a lot of cool stuff in book three. Book three is wild. Some familiar events, and then a whole bunch of new stuff. So book three is kind of like the payoff. It's quite well done. If you've seen the series before, if you haven't, it's still good. Um, so yeah, that's enough yammering from me, and we'll get cracking. And yeah, neat stuff on the way. Chapter 15, The Attack. Amuro Ray? Lieutenant Junior Grade Cusco Al was so shocked when she heard the name that she repeated it out loud. That's right, Challia Bull said, looking at her curiously. We have information that he's the same pilot who destroyed the first Elmeth model, and that he's headed in our direction. Cusco felt suddenly naked, embarrassed before Challia, but she feebly tried to respond to his unvoiced questions. I've met him before, she confessed hesitatingly. On side 6. I I never realized he was capable of anything like that. He seemed so young. The instant she heard Amoureux's name, a vivid image had popped into her mind. He was waiting for her in front of the Flanagan Institute with the nervous look of a youth with more on his mind than just a platonic meeting. And there was something she had found rather charming about that, so much so that she probably would have gone along with whatever he was thinking. After all, she had helped to rescue him when he had drifted near the Cassetta 3 in his escape pod, and she had even helped him destroy it later. It wasn't as if they were total strangers. She had intuitively liked him, and that made her feel good. She had enjoyed the almost new type sensitivity of his character, and toyed with the idea of getting to know him even better, but that was all. Perhaps it had been a mistake not to bring the escape capsule back to the Flanagan Institute for a more thorough investigation, but she knew the Federation had no weapons system that could compare to the Psychomo, and, following that logic, she didn't see how the capsule could have been all that important. It was only one part of the new mobile suit. Besides, she had liked Amuro and sincerely wanted to help him. She turned to her commander, Char and asked, "Did you have a chance to see how developed he was as a new type?" "No. Char answered, fidgeting with the collar on his pilot suit. But I can tell you this. During the attack on LH, we're almost positive your Elmeth was hit by a blast from Amuro Ray's Gundam. Cusco Al couldn't help muttering to herself, "Of all people, it would have to be Amuro Ray in the Gundam." She was a woman with strong likes and dislikes, but she had never dreamed that she might develop strong feelings for an officer in the Federation forces, especially since he had reddish hair. That was normally enough to make her want to laugh. But there was something about the way he had regained. I have no idea what that's supposed to mean, by the way. Just, yeah, she just giggles when she sees red hair. I don't know. Cusco Al's interesting. She's special. More than anything else. Oh, whoops. Wrong line. Especially since he had reddish hair. That was normally enough to make her want to laugh. But there was something about the way he had regained consciousness on the Cassetta 3 and instinctively dealt with the crew in such a cautious manner. Something about the way he had been so perceptive about his environment. More than anything else, she realized, it was the fact that he was a sensitive person that had made her first like him. Then, when she had learned that he was also intelligent, and the sort who did what he said he would do, and had enormous strength of character, well, that had made her positive first impression escalate to another level. Federation troops might have burned her parents to death, but Amuro Ray was different, so she would forgive him for being with the enemy. That was the way her femininity asserted itself. Perhaps, she thought, I can even contact him through the Psychomo interface and let him know I'm piloting the Elmeth. What Cusco Al did not know was that her naive sentimentality would be first swallowed and then crushed by the overwhelming reality of war. It's like five shadowing. When the 127th Autonomous reached Area 365, it immediately came under observation by Zeon scouts from both Solomon and Abo Aku as the most advanced exposed unit in the Federation Armada. On Solomon, Dozel Zabi told his men, "Ignore it, it's just a feint. Revel bypassed us to take Granada before, so now he's coming to get us. Get our forces out in position and keep them together." General Revel, meantime, hoped Caecilia Zabi would overestimate the importance of the 127th, so he could flush her Abo Aku-based new-type unit out in the open. "After the fight on Texas," he told his staff, "Caecilia will suspect we have our own new type corps. It doesn't matter if the Pegasus II is really manned by true new types or not. The important thing is that she believe that the 127th is a true new type unit." "Do you believe it, sir?" an aide asked. "Depends on their performance in battles to come," he replied. "At this point, they look pretty good." General Revel personally commanded the main Federation fleet centered around his flagship, the Drogue, and the Drog, and the carrier Trafalgar. Yet even this fleet was but part of a giant armada of over 320 Federation ships. After leaving the moon, the Armada had appeared positioned to strike Abo Aku directly. In actual fact, however, neither the Zeon forces nor the crews of the Federation ships themselves knew where the Armada would finally converge, for it was not just dispersed along a single plane, but within a three-dimensional spherical area over 10,000 kilometers in diameter, nearly the same size as the planet Earth. In this vast space, 320 ships were like floating specks of dust in a cavernous hall, so dispersed they presented little immediate military threat. But when collected together at their final rendezvous point, they would constitute an awesome destructive force. Mankind was standing on the brink of yet another bloody power struggle. A single red light suddenly winked on the ceiling display over the Pegasus 2 bridge, and Ensign Marker Clan yelled, "Enemy ship sighted!" The first Zeon force encountered was not a new type unit, but a special task force of 3 Musai-class cruisers from Solomon, carrying a total of 6 Zakus. The order immediately went out. "Launch Tomahawk Squadron!" The 12 Cosmo fighters under Lieutenant Commander McVeary's command were released from their moorings and floated off the Pegasus 2 upper deck. With verniers deployed on a wing-like design, they resembled fat spears. Referred to as fighters, they had a far greater firepower than old-style heavy bombers. Rocket trails flared from them as they launched, and then they were followed in loose formation by the ship's 5 mobile suits. Bright next issued a series of commands. "Enemy has penetrated the second combat line. Ready main cannon. Missile elevation 0.3 degrees. Launch 9, 2 volleys." From 12 missile tubes on either leg of the ship's front section, 2 volleys of 9 missiles each instantly streaked forth, leaving a trail of light among the stars. "Initiate evasive action. B formation." "B formation," Mirai yelled in response, flicking a switch in front of her and putting the ship on an autopilot. If she had to maneuver quickly to evade an incoming missile or attacking suit, she could manually override auto, but as soon as the maneuver ended, the guidance system would default back to auto and thus keep the ship in formation. The warships following the Pegasus, the Cypress and the Graydon, began crisscrossing back and forth around her in an evasive maneuver, preparing for enemy missiles. "Incoming at 12 o'clock, 2 minutes." From the bridge of the Pegasus 2, the crew suddenly spotted 2 bands of light from missiles streaking toward them, but in almost the same instant they exploded. A Federation suit had picked them off. "I think it was Amuro," Sayla said softly. "Lower protective shutters!" Bright yelled. Shutters immediately descended over all the windows on the bridge, but the crew never lost their view, for the inside of the windows now functioned as display monitors. "Second wave incoming," called out Marker Clan, the operator, in a tense voice, as he spotted a dozen streaks of light from new approaching missiles. "Ready ship guns," Bright barked. "Fire at will. 4 missiles, raise vertical elevation 0.6 degrees. Launch 3 volleys of 12 missiles each." It was the sort of missile defense that was nearly futile in 3-dimensional space. The Pegasus's anti-missile missiles streaked forth in what looked like a single band of light, but some of them had apparently been launched too close together, for they soon collided with each other, mushrooms of light flaring not too far from the ship. Luckily, the incoming Zeon missiles were no more successful. In telescopic mode, one of Bright's displays showed 3 enemy ships among the stars, and he knew they were close enough for his main cannon. "Target in range! Fire main cannon!" Brilliant beams of light, far more dense than the trails left by the missiles earlier, belched forth from the Pegasus's 2 megaparticle cannons and pierced the blackness, stretching for what seemed like an eternity. The beams emitted sparks on their periphery, probably from contact with comet fragments or star dust, but neither appeared to hit the enemy. It had long been rumored in the Federation forces that Zeon's Musai-class cruisers were adept at evasion, and the Pegasus's difficulty hitting them confirmed it. 20 seconds after the Pegasus's cannons fired, beams from the Zeon forces streaked back in retaliation, suggesting that they had a less sophisticated telescopic mode on their gun sights and thus took longer to aim. "Tough luck about the lousy optics, guys," Bright yelled at the Zeon ships on the display monitor in front of him. "Just try and hit us!" And then it happened.
A beam fired from the Pegasus struck the Musai cruiser on the left, and an enormous burst of light flared in the darkness. But the explosion did not appear to have been fatal. "Give the left one 2 more blasts," Bright barked. "McVary's squadron will be there in 5 more seconds." He knew that from then on it would be too dangerous to support McVary with either beam cannon or missiles. He also knew that the enemy suits would soon be on top of the Pegasus too. It was critical that Amuro and his men destroy them before they could wreak any damage. In the distance, he spotted the telltale fatal mushroom of light from the Musai just hit. "One Musai cruiser destroyed, sir," our Oscar yelled, "but I'm picking up what looks like Zakos at 11 o'clock, elevation -3 degrees. Bright prayed that Amuro's unit would be able to intercept the enemy suits. If the Zakus followed normal Zeon tactics, they would try to slip under the ship's defenses. One never knew what would happen in a combat situation, but he had faith in Amuro. The Pegasus II and the other 3 ships in the 127th Group continued to close in on the enemy. When it appeared that Lieutenant Commander McVary had finally reached the Musai ships and commenced his attack, Bright couldn't help thinking, "I wish he had more than 12 fighters." No matter how seasoned a warrior McVary might be, the odds against him were steep. Amuro and his men steadfastly approached the 6 enemy Zakus. "Give 'em hell, guys!" he yelled into his mic, knowing that with the Minovsky concentration they were encountering, it was probably his last radio transmission for a while. "And don't forget, we're better than they are!" Sarkis and Kriya had both been in combat before, but they had originally trained on Cosmo fighters, and the new Jim suits were harder to handle. For example, the Jim's electronic 360-degree display system was nice, but it was initially unnerving to a pilot used to making direct visual sightings through the plexiglass canopy of a fighter. Then they met the Zakus. Sarkis took on the first one, which unfortunately had the colored antenna-like rod of a squad leader. He fired his beam rifle. The Zaku easily evaded it and closed in. Sarkis yelled in terror, but in the same instant a beam pierced the Zaku, and it vanished in a ball of light. Amuro's Gundam had slipped up on Sarkis's right side. "Sarkis!" Amuro barked into his mic. "Don't just fly with inertia. You've got to be more proactive." "Yes, sir," the Jim pilot responded. Sarkis's Jim was nimbler than a Cosmo fighter, and he was trying to operate it as confidently as possible, flying in a zigzag pattern above the assumed line of combat. Then he heard Amuro's voice call out again, "10 o'clock, up 15 degrees!" He looked up and spotted the glowing mono-eye of a Zaku. In rapid succession, several blasts creased his Jim's armor. Cursing, panicking, he got the Zaku in his sights and fired a volley from his beam rifle. With a whoosh, one blast hit home. The Zaku began spewing beads of light from its back, and then raised both hands as if clawing in desperation at the heavens. Sarkis fired another beam. The Zaku's limbs disintegrated, and the entire suit turned into a ball of light. "Sarkis, don't waste your fire! Conserve your energy!" It was the scolding voice of his unit leader, Amuro, again. After Kai and Hayato had each made one kill, Amuro bagged one more. Then he led his entire unit in pursuit of the sole remaining Zaku as it tried to flee back to its mother ship. "Kriya," Amuro commanded, "I want you out in front." He wanted to present the ensign with an easy target, but the man still managed to bungle it and took 2 shots to finish off the retreating Zaku. By the time the MS unit caught up with McVary's Tomahawk squadron, the last remaining Musai cruiser had been badly damaged, but it was still putting up a fierce resistance.
Since McVeary had already lost 4 of his fighters, Amuro's unit helped him out by slamming several beam blasts into the ship's prow and finishing her off. Only 13 minutes had elapsed between the moment of initial contact with the Zeon task force and its annihilation. In terms of firepower, the Pegasus II and its accompanying ships had had a slight advantage over the Zeon squadron, but in reality the battle had been determined by the tactics employed. Not a single attacking Zaku had been able to penetrate the 127th's defense. Back in the briefing room on Pegasus II, Amuro stated his opinion emphatically.
That was nothing. We haven't even seen the real enemy yet. And I don't mean Kycilia or Dozel's regular forces. I mean Zeon's true new type unit.
Lieutenant Commander McVeary, still preoccupied with the last battle, couldn't resist a dig at Amuro's MS unit. "If you'd reached us earlier, Mr. Amuro," he caustically commented, "I wouldn't have lost 4 of my fighters." Everyone knew the criticism wasn't fair, and that he was just letting off steam. In reality, he had been amazed at the speed with which Amuro and his men had joined the fray. He had heard that MS battles were essentially chase and be chased melees, but in the entire war he had never witnessed such a feat. 6 enemy Zakus had been unable to sink a single Federation ship, and had instead themselves been annihilated. He knew the 127th had achieved a phenomenal victory, but on a personal, emotional level, he couldn't ignore the fact that several of his own men had been lost. McVeary still had enormous pride in the vanguard role of his Cosmo Fighter unit, but out of pique he couldn't help sarcastically commenting, "Next time, maybe you'd prefer it if we formed the rear guard." And he wasn't ready for the answer he received. Amuro took his words literally.
Well, if that's what you'd prefer, sir, he said, maybe we can try it next time.
"Whoa, wait a minute, Sonny," McVeary answered in a quick about-face. "Let's be serious here. I'm a Tomahawk man. That's not funny."
Well, sir, we'll eventually be confronting the same Zeon new type unit that attacked our LH moon base. Frankly, I don't think there's any reason for you to do anything suicidal. The most important thing, it seems to me, sir, is to defend the Pegasus. Don't you agree?
"What are you talking about? Hell, the Red Comet, or whatever he's called, isn't some sort of supernatural character. Just because he's destroyed a few Federation ships doesn't mean he can destroy the whole Tomahawk squadron."
I'm sorry to differ with you, sir, but the unit on its way here is far more powerful than the old Red Comet.
"You're talking about that Elmet thing, right? Who knows what the hell those mobile armor contraptions really are, anyway? Right now, we're just dealing with prototypes."
Maybe, Amuro replied, standing his ground. No offense intended, sir, but in the interest of saving as many of your men's lives as possible, I honestly think it'd be better if your squadron did take the rear.
Amuro, making friends.
Oh, good morning, Optical Antenna. Thanks for tuning in. The 127th Autonomous continued along its assigned course, but a turning point had been reached. General Revel's flagship, the Drog, fired off a blue signal flare that was observed far off on the Federation's FS moonbase. FS then transmitted a coded laser message to each of the Federation fleets in the Armada. Proceed at third combat speed. Each unit commander was thus finally permitted to open the secret file delivered on departure, and to learn that the Armada's ultimate target was Zeon's space fortress, Aboaku. Bright Noah, for his part, finally learned that the 127th's true mission was to use all means available to destroy Zeon reinforcements from Solomon. He knew that Solomon forces would not sit idly by during the 10 hours it would take for the dozen or more Federation fleets to form a virtual wall between Solomon and Aboaku.
He also knew that if the armada was not careful, it would be constantly harassed from the rear by Solomon forces as it closed in on Abo Aku. The 127th, at the highest elevation relative to the plane of the ecliptic, would act as a shield for the armada, and it would be the first unit attacked. "Here we are," Bright grumbled from his captain's seat on the bridge. "The decoy, the bait, the sitting duck. If I understand this right, it looks like Revel's ships will take on the main force from Abo Aku, while we hold off everyone else from Solomon."
That at least means the Red Comet won't come after us, right?
Kai seemed relieved when he said it.
"He's right, isn't he?"
Amuro asked, glancing at Mirai. After pondering it a second, Mirai answered,
"I don't think so. We've won enough skirmishes to attract attention from all over. We'll be targeted by both Solomon and Abo Aku forces, but since we're too small a unit for them to waste a large fleet on, I bet the special unit led by the Red Comet will eventually come after us."
Sayla, manning the comm console on the bridge, removed her headset to better hear the conversation taking place around her. Could her brother really be coming after them? Mirai seemed to think so. Sayla felt trapped in a web of fate. In her heart, she knew he was on his way. On Vice Admiral Dozel's flagship, the Gandao, the Comtex quickly noticed the increased activity of the Federation forces, and the fact that they appeared to be converging around a single area in space.
Don't they regard Solomon as a worthy enemy?
Dozel wondered out loud. He felt oddly slighted by General Revel. But when he heard the news that 3 of his Musai-class ships had just been destroyed in a fray with a Federation unit, he was enraged.
What?
He yelled.
They annihilated our cruisers in only 10 minutes?
Yes, sir,
A junior officer replied nervously.
one of our patrol ships in Field 550 sighted the explosions and went straight to the area, but it was too late. Our ships had already vanished, sir.
Even though they had Zaku's protecting them?
Yes, sir. 6 of them, sir.
That should have been plenty. What the hell went wrong?
Dozel's face was beet red with anger, and he had to restrain himself from striking the officer giving the report.
The Federation force appears to be centered around a White Base-class ship, sir. We understand there may be a new type unit involved.
Who says so?
The skipper of the patrol ship, sir. Number 600.
Dozel slowly lowered himself into a chair and commanded an orderly. Oh gosh, this entire sentence has turned into a hash. Oh no. Hash. Now I'm hungry. Dozel slowly lowered himself into a chair and commanded an orderly next to him to bring him some coffee.
Well, he said, we certainly don't need the captain of some little patrol ship to engage in speculation, do we? That won't do when we're trying to formulate a coherent strategy. Our main battle isn't going to be with some fuzzy new type unit or whatever it's called. I want our observation of the entire Federation Armada beefed up. I want to know what route of attack Revel's going to take to Abo Aku. We'll leave behind the minimum number of ships needed to defend Solomon. All others will launch with us.
After Dozel barked out his orders, he reached out for his coffee tube and took a sip.
Just wait, Revel, he muttered. I'll teach you a lesson you won't forget.
On Abo Aku, Kycilia Zabi couldn't help smiling when she heard of the change in the Federation's movements. Technically speaking, she wasn't responsible for Abo Aku. It was under her brother Girin's jurisdiction, and she was merely using it temporarily.
Girin should fly here and defend the place himself, she snapped.
But could he arrive in time? It would still take several days before the system project could be completed. The real question was whether or not her own forces on Abo Aku should move out to strike the Federation armada, and if so, how she could inflict maximum damage on them with her limited strength.
There won't be time for us to try and wipe out the Federation units one by one, Char Aznable said. We should wait until they come closer and converge.
Why do you say that? Caecilia demanded, noting that his view was at odds with the strategy put forth by the Zeon General Staff.
Because the forces coming at us aren't omnipotent. I think we should draw them in closer and then crush them right in front of Abo Aku. And I think Your Excellency's forces should lead the attack. If we try and hit their fleets individually, we might accidentally disperse them. That might gain time for the system project to be completed, but it would indirectly aid your brother, the Supreme Commander.
I won't let him use the system. I'm going to show him what we can do without it.
Your brother's an extremely ambitious man, Excellency. Remember, this is war. But I understand your wishes. I'll take my unit out to meet the enemy and hope Vice Admiral Dozel comes through to help us.
Char turned and started to exit Caecilia's office. He felt angry. He wanted to tell her that in order to survive politically, they should abandon Abo Aku and flee. But he didn't. He knew she was obsessed with the idea of staying and destroying the new type unit on the Federation's White Base class warship. Margaret Ring Blair was standing and waiting nervously for Char outside the door to Caecilia's office.
Are you really taking off?
She asked when he emerged.
It looks that way, he said. I think this is it. Take care of yourself, Margaret.
Thank you, Commander.
There were other secretaries and aides watching in the reception area, so he merely touched her elbow. She immediately sensed his meaning and moved to open the door for him. Once outside, he turned to her.
At this point, Margaret, he said, the most important thing is to survive. Don't do anything rash.